Hi, welcome to a revision exam walkthrough session on GCSE chemistry, where we're going to be focusing on bonding. I'm using a booklet which has been made by myself, one of the creators of Case Science, which you can get on our website if you would like to have this booklet to work through. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you through exam questions that have come up in exam papers before, okay? I want you to have a piece of paper and a pen to do this with me. And at any point, you can actually pause the stream, the video, where you can attempt the question before I do it. So once you've done it, you can then mark it with me as I take you through the question, okay? So first question, what is an ionic bond? This is a 2-mark question. I'm going to tell you the exact language that you need in every single question. So what is an ionic bond? Electrostatic force of attraction, 1 mark, between oppositely charged ions. Okay, an ionic bond is a bond between ions, so it's the electrostatic force of attraction between oppositely charged ions. Learn that definition and you're guaranteed to get 2 marks. Next question. Which particle is the negative ion? Explain your answer. So this is worth 3 marks. So you get 1 mark for stating which particle is a negative ion. So even if you have no idea, it's a 1 out of 3 chance. And then the next 2 marks are for explaining your answer. So let's look at the table. We can see we've got particle A, B, and C. And then we've been told how many protons, electrons, and neutrons are in each particle. And by particle, it really just means ion, okay? So particle A has 12 protons, which means there is a charge of plus 12, 14 electrons, which means there is a charge of minus 14. And remember, the number of neutrons does not affect the charge. So we do not need to consider the number of neutrons here. So let's focus on the protons and electrons. So if there are 12 protons plus 12 and 14 electrons minus 14, overall, this means the charge of particle A is going to be 12, take away 14. So the charge is going to be minus 2. So far we may have already answered the question. Let's check what particle B and particle C are like. Well, 26 protons is plus 26. 23 electrons minus 23. Plus 26 minus 23 has a charge, therefore, of plus 3. 13 protons is plus 13. 13 electrons has a charge of minus 13. We can see together that equals 0, a neutral charge. So straight away, we can now see particle A is the negative ion. So if we just write particle A, the examiner is going to give you a mark. Now, what do we need to do to explain your answer? Well, if we say more electrons than protons, this will get the 2nd mark. Because look, we can see there are more electrons than protons, which is causing particle A to have a negative charge. And then you get a 3rd mark for actually stating the charge. Okay, minus 2 charge. Done. And that's your 3 marks. So remember, when you see a question that it says explain, you always have to state or describe something first. So in this case, we stated the charge, the ion, sorry. And then we then say why we know that, okay? So explaining is giving a reason why you know something is the way it is. Next question. Okay, question 3. Remember, pause the video stream as you do this, okay? Explain how a lead atom, Pb, is able to change into a lead ion, Pb2+. So we're going from an atom. Remember, it doesn't matter if it's lead. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. But what does matter? We're going from an atom into an ion. Now, what type of ion are we going into? We're going into a positively charged ion. Okay, positively charged. But what is the charge? The charge is Pb2+. Okay, so we're going to write the ion has a charge of 2+. So we need to explain, we need to give a reason why the atom is now an ion with a charge of 2+. This is super, super easy. We can see that when an atom becomes a positively charged ion or a cation, what happens is electrons are lost. You write that is 1 mark. Or the lead atom loses electrons. In whatever tense you're using, that is all you need to say. But look, we can see we've been given a number. So for an ion to have a charge of 2+, 2 electrons have been lost. So if you just said 2 electrons are lost, you get 2 marks, okay? So you get 1 mark for stating that 2 electrons are lost. So 2 electrons, you get 1 mark for stating 2 electrons, and you get the second mark for stating the fact that they are lost. So in one full sentence, you would just write 2 electrons are lost. That would be 2 marks. Okay, next set of questions. Here we go. Question 4. This one, you'll be shocked at how many students get this question wrong. Calculate the number of protons, electrons, and neutrons in the following ions. So here we've got the ions, and you've been given the mass number and the atomic number. Now I've given you a selection of different ions here. You may just be given one. And a lot of students do not know how to use the mass number and the atomic number to then figure out how many protons, electrons, and neutrons there are when we have an ion. A lot of students will know what to do with the actual atoms of those elements, but students will get lost when it comes to figuring out the number of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Now, it's important to understand the number of protons and neutrons never changes when ions are formed. It's only the number of electrons that changes when ions are formed, okay? So the atomic number is always the same as the number of protons, so we can fill that out straight away. So hydrogen has 1 proton, the fluoride ion has 9 protons, the oxide ion has 8 protons, the sodium ion has 11 protons, the aluminium ion has 13 protons, the nitride ion has 7 protons, and the magnesium ion has 12 protons. This does not change. Same with the neutrons. But how do we calculate the number of neutrons? We do the mass number, take away the atomic number. Okay, so you do the mass number, take away the atomic number. Pause the video now to do that yourself. If not, I'm going to continue. So we do 1 take away 1 equals 0. 19 take away 9 equals 10. 16 take away 8 equals 8. 23 take away 11 equals 12. 27 take away 13 equals 14. 14 take away 7 equals 7. 24 take away 12 equals 12. Simple as that. Now, this is the column where a lot of students can struggle. So you need to look at the charge of the ion as well as the atomic number, because the atomic number tells us how many electrons there are in an atom. However, if we have an ion, we know the atom has either lost or gained electrons. And when we have a positive charge, okay, a positive charge means the atom has lost electrons. If we have a negative charge, the atom has gained electrons. So a charge of +1 means the atomic number, there there is 1 electron, and because the charge is +1, that electron has been lost. That means an hydrogen ion has 0 electrons. If you see -1, there is 1 extra electron. So the atomic number is 9. 9 electrons means 1 has been gained, 10 electrons. Oxygen has an atomic number of 8, which means the atom has 8 electrons. The oxide ion has a charge of 2-. 2 electrons have been gained. 8 plus 2 equals 10. The atomic number of sodium is 11. The charge is +1. So 11 take away 1 means there are 10 electrons, as 1 electron has been lost. The atomic number of aluminium is 13. The charge is 3+, therefore 3 electrons have been lost. So an aluminium ion has 10 electrons. Nitrogen normally has 7 electrons, but when 3 electrons have been gained to become a nitride ion, this means 7 plus 3 equals the nitride ion has 10 electrons. The magnesium ion has an atomic number of 12, so there are 12 electrons in the atom. The ion has a charge of 2+, 2 electrons have been lost. 12 take away 2 means there are 10 electrons. Okay, if you never understood that, watch the video I have of how cations form and watch the video I have of how anions form to help you understand that in more detail. You can find that on the website. Now let's go on to the next question. Question 5. This is a classic question where a lot of students tend to get 1 or 2 out of 3. I find in class a lot of students understand this, but when it comes to the exam, students panic. One of the reasons is because you look at sodium chloride and you panic as to what type of bonding does sodium chloride have? Well, you need to use the periodic table in this case. Sodium is a metal, and the chloride ion is originally chlorine, which is a non-metal. And when a metal and a non-metal react, the bonding between those ions that form it has ionic bonding. Okay, ionic bonding. Now you need to know, if we go back to the original definition of what is an ionic bond, you'll know that in ionic bonding we have the electrostatic force of attraction between oppositely charged ions. This is why knowing the definition of this is so important, because it then allows you to answer this question and understand it properly. The language you need to use is this. I'm going to keep it super simple. You get 1 mark for writing strong ionic bonds, because we're explaining, you're saying why, explain why sodium chloride has a high melting point. Well, the higher the melting point, the more energy is required to break the bonds between whatever is in that substance. And in this case, it's ionic bonding. So if this substance, sodium chloride, has a high melting point, well, this ionic bonding must be strong. Where do we find these ionic bonds? You get another mark for saying between the ions. So you need to say strong ionic bonds between the ions, and the last mark requires lots of energy to break, because the more energy required to break these strong ionic bonds, the higher the melting point. And that is it. Strong ionic bonds between the ions requires lots of energy to break. Imagine this is all you need to write for a 3-mark question. So I don't want to see you waffling in the exam, because as an examiner, this is all I'm looking for, okay? Next question. This one is a classic question that a lot of students struggle with. Explain what is needed for sodium fluoride to conduct electricity. Again, you need to be able to identify that sodium is a metal, and fluoride, which comes from fluorine, is a non-metal. Now, if you do not know that, look at your periodic table. And if you don't know how to use a periodic table, watch my video on how to use periodic tables. It will massively help you. So we know a metal and a non-metal, they bond together to form ionic bonding in between the ions. Now, you'll know ionic compounds can conduct electricity and can't conduct electricity depending on their state. So what is needed for sodium fluoride to conduct electricity? Well, this is what you need to say. You need to say that the sodium fluoride needs to be dissolved in water, okay, or aqueous. If you said the word aqueous, I'll give you a mark, I'll tick that. Or if we decided to melt the ionic compound so that we made it molten or liquid, put that in a sentence, I'm marking it. And lastly, if this sodium fluoride compound is either dissolved in water or molten or liquid, you would have got 2 marks by now. To get the 3rd mark, this makes the ions free to move. Tick, 3rd mark, that is it. Okay, I'm not going to go into the science behind it and drawing diagrams. You have that in those videos. This is an exam walkthrough. I don't want to spend too long drawing diagrams. This is purely going over the exact language that you need to absolutely kill your exam and get every single question correct. Remember, you only need about 72, 73% to get a grade 9. Okay, next question. Question 7. Describe what happens when a sodium atom reacts with a chlorine atom. Notice I've not given you any information about where sodium is in the periodic table, where chlorine is. Again, you need to know how to use the periodic table to answer this question. So we are describing, we're just saying what is happening. We don't need to explain why. We're saying what's happening when a sodium atom reacts with a chlorine atom. You need to know sodium is a metal, chlorine is a non-metal. So straight away, your brain needs to be linking, metal or non-metal. That means this is what type of bonding? Ionic bonding. So we have a metal reacting with a non-metal. So clearly, we're talking about ionic bonding here, okay? And you need to then know what group is sodium in. Sodium is in group 1. Chlorine is in group 7. So now we have done our research into the 2 atoms, which I expect you to do just to frame your mind to know what you're going to write. Now we can go into the exact language that we need, okay? So there's a lot of things here that you can say. So you can say, we're going to start off with, depending on the mark scheme, some are kinder than others. Sodium loses, imagine you get 1 mark for saying that. Sodium loses 1 electron. So sodium loses 1 electron because it's in group 1 and it wants to lose that 1 outer electron. It has already 2 marks out of 4. Chlorine gains, okay, chlorine gains that 1 electron from sodium. 4 marks. Already, 4 marks. It's an easy question. And then you can write Na plus or sodium cation or charge is +1 for another mark, potentially, if you never said that above, okay? And then the chloride anion, so it's Cl- or chloride anion, which has a charge of -1. And the last thing you can say is an ionic bond forms. And I always get my students to define what an ionic bond is, just to be extra, to make sure you've really got all the language in, and just define what the ionic bond is. You don't have to write a lot of language. You put that into sentences where you say, sodium loses 1 electron, full stop. Chlorine gains that 1 electron from sodium, full stop. A sodium cation is formed with a charge of +1. A chloride anion is formed with a charge of -1. An ionic bond forms between the ions, which is the electrostatic force of attraction between oppositely charged ions. You're only using about that much space. And then you've got your 4 marks, which is, if you're doing combined, about what, 6% of the paper? Okay? If you're doing separate, a little bit less. Explain how calcium and oxygen produce the ionic compound calcium oxide. I'm going to give you a moment to pause this video and I want you to attempt this question, okay? So explain how calcium and oxygen produce the ionic compound calcium oxide. Well, it's going to be similar language. Calcium loses 2 electrons to have a full outer shell. Oxygen gains 2 electrons. Now, this mark scheme is a little bit harder. Some mark schemes are different in different papers. So in this one, you're getting calcium loses 2 electrons to be 1 mark. Oxygen gains 2 electrons is a mark. Some mark schemes can be harder than others. If you look at these types of questions in different exam papers over the years, it does vary, which is why I always say to my students, write as detailed as possible to guarantee you get the marks, okay? Calcium cation is formed, calcium cation, or you could say Ca2+, which automatically tells us about the charge. Oxide anion, O2-, and then define the ionic bond. Notice it's pretty much the same mark scheme. It's just that the beginning part is not as easy to gain all the marks, okay? So that's ionic bonding, done. Those are the key questions that you can get about ionic bonding. Simple as that, to be honest.